So late in March, I was in a live show when I got this comment.
I can't participate this until... What is that? Is that a misspell or is that something I've never heard of?
And once the commenter explained that this stood for the hardest reading challenge you'll ever do, I of course had to look it up.
I can't see a title like that and not want to do it.
And while most of the chat rightfully decided that they would never subject themselves to such a thing, I had a different reaction.
New vlog series, maybe? This is a terrible idea. I shouldn't make decisions while sprinting.
And so 1 week later, on April 1st, no, not a joke, I decided to begin my HRCYED challenge. Still don't know how to pronounce it. I've watched the video, like I should know, but I don't know. But yeah, that's what this video is. We're talking about that. Now, it would take me quite some time to get you caught up with the different challenges that exist on the board, but I'm just gonna talk about each one as it comes up and as I read things for that challenge so that it's not like front loaded with all of this crazy information. But if you want a full and in-depth look at this challenge, please do watch this video from the creator of the challenge, which was introducing it to begin with. So this channel is QWERTY, and there's a full spreadsheet that goes along with this challenge. I'm going to be using that to track my own progress, but when I am talking about it in these videos, I've actually created some of my own visuals to go along with it that just fit a little bit more the theme of my channel, and they look pretty, and I wanted to avoid doing other work, so I made these instead. This is what the full bingo board looks like. Now, it is a bingo board, but the goal is to, within 1 full year, complete every square on here. So we're not going for just a bingo of 5 connected squares. We're going for a full blackout. So let's talk about my April reading. So the first square that I wanted to tackle was a no-brainer for me, and that was the local author square, because Stephen Graham Jones was about to do a talk here in, well, not in Denver, but in Boulder, which is very close by. And that's actually where he lives. And that kind of seemed perfect for me because then I could see him. It would give me incentive to read his book right away. I could support the local bookstore that was running the event, and I could also see the Boulder Library for the first time. That's what we like to call a win-win-win-win. The Buffalo Hunter is basically a vampire revenge novel, but in the way that Stephen Graham Jones pictures vampires to be. It follows a few characters. There is Etsy in 2012, and her story begins with her great-great-grandfather's notebook being found, and she's reading through that. And that ancestor was Arthur Bucharn, a Lutheran pastor, and the notebook tells the story of a Blackfeet Indian named Goodstab who comes into Bucharn's church one day and asks to do a confession. And despite being, you know, a Lutheran pastor, Bucharn agrees to listen to Goodstab's story, and he also writes it down in the notebook. I only say despite because, you know, confession is like a Catholic thing, not a Lutheran thing. So I'm not saying that like Lutherans wouldn't listen to people. This was great. This was really fantastic. One of the best books I've read this year. There's something about like the way that it progresses through the story and the way that it kind of like grows into what it is that I really appreciate. And it's like a bit of this like monster story. This almost felt like a mythic type story, but not fully going there, which is good because personally, that's not my favorite type of book and usually ones that I stay away from. But I feel like the way that, like it felt like that without being that, which was good. I think the only criticism I have for this is that the beginning felt a little bit repetitive, but really it was not a lingering feeling that I had. It was just like 2 times maybe where I was like, okay, like I don't really want to go through this again. But then it continued to evolve from there. Even though it did have that little bit at the beginning, I still think that overall, like fantastic book. The characterizations, the different voices, this is told really from the perspective of 3 different people. We've got the present day Etsy. She is the one that is reading her like great-grandfather's journal, maybe just 2 greats. And he was the Lutheran pastor. And so we get the pastor's perspective. And then of course we also get Goodstab's perspective. And those 3 voices, the way that Stephen Graham Jones was able to write like 3 very distinct voices that you never were like questioning whose head you were in. I mean, obviously like you knew based off the setup to the chapter, but even like throughout reading, there's no way you were gonna forget whose mind you were in, you know what I mean? And as somebody who sometimes struggles with multiple POV books, I didn't struggle at all. I had a great time. Well, having a great time seems a bit much. There were definitely moments that made me a little bit squeamish, but I think that he did a good job of kind of like just pushing right on through those, and they were quick. And so while there is technically a lot of those scenes, each of those scenes is like generally, for the most part, very quickly over. So this got a full square done, which is great because a lot of these squares are going to take a lot of books to accomplish. So it's nice to just get one done off the bat. Additionally, we can use this book towards other squares that we're allowed to double up on. On my bingo board, those are the ones that are shown in the slightly darker shade of green. So a book can't count towards the multiple lighter shade of squares here, but it can count for one of those squares and then multiple darker green shades. So I chose this book to go towards B for Buffalo in the A to Z challenge. That challenge, of course, being that every letter in the alphabet must be represented by a book, either because the title of the book has a word that starts with that letter, or the author's name has it as like the first letter of their first, middle, or last name, whatever they have on the book. Another prompt that is very similar to this that works the same way is spelling your full name. So for me, I'm using Sarah Dawn Freshly. Yes, I am using the YouTubeification of my last name, which really just means I'm using the spelling that I use on YouTube rather than how my last name is actually spelled. I chose this to go towards H for Hunter. Then there is the genre challenge. This one obviously fulfills the horror prompt. And the last one we can use to double this one up on is the rainbow challenge, which is to get every color of a specific rainbow. This one right here. These are the colors given to us in the challenge. This one I'm using towards brown because we've got the buffalo on the front. So to look back at our full bingo board, we can add one to the A to Z challenge, the spell your name challenge, the genre challenge, and the rainbow challenge. So while I was reading the Buffalo Hunter, I started more seriously looking into each of the squares that are on this bingo board, because some of them do take a little bit of looking into to figure out exactly what books you would be reading or what books would work for it. And one of those challenges that I knew I was going to have to pay special attention to was this book blurb square. You have to pick a book that is blurbed by at least 3 authors, and then you have to read that original book and also a book by each of the authors, each of the 3 authors that have blurbed it. So this square needs a total of 4 books being read. I spent quite some time looking through my own TBR, hoping that I would find a book that has been blurbed by maybe like 1 or 2 authors that I already own a book by. That way I'm mostly working from my TBR. And while I found a couple that like met this criteria, I actually ended up finding one that had 3 authors that I also owned books by that I had not yet read. And you'll never guess who the author of the first book is. It's Stephen Graham Jones. How crazy is that? So you can see here that at the top, he is blurbed by Tommy Orange, the author of There, which I have read, and I own Wandering Stars, which is the follow-up to There. It's also blurbed by Grady Hendrix. And then lastly, down at the bottom here, we have Carmen Maria Machado, who wrote In the Dream House, which I also own on my TBR. Honestly, such a great find. And usually I would have waited to read another book by the same author back to back, especially for a genre that I don't read a lot of. But since I still had a little bit of time before the book event, I thought it could be fun to start this book as well, so that seeing Stephen Graham Jones in person would mean even more. And it really did. Like, this was such a great moment. The Only Good Indians is another revenge horror book, but this time it's more focused on a group of people, those being 4 kids that had done something in their younger years that continues to haunt them into adulthood by way of a vengeful entity following them and ready to exact justice. Did I finish The Only Good Indians? No, but it's time to get to Boulder, so let's go. Does anybody else feel like they turn into the dumbest person when talking to somebody they admire and respect? Because every time I go to an author talk and I actually talk to the author, I'm like, am I the dumbest person alive? Do I say the silliest things? That is what I'm gonna think about this whole drive home. The book event last night was so good. I'm really glad that I ended up staying for the signing. So I had brought this book, which I did not finish before getting there, but because I waited for like 20 minutes in line, I was able to read some more. And then between a little bit last night before bed, I was so tired. And then the rest this morning, I have officially finished this one. Also, let's just take a moment to appreciate. But yeah, I finished this morning. Are you ready? 5 stars. A 5-star horror book. Who even am I? I did not see this coming, especially I was like, I don't even know I'm giving this book the best chance by reading it right after another book by Stephen Graham Jones, after another horror book, after another book that's like so focused on revenge specifically. Like, am I giving this book the best chance by doing all of that? Especially for like a genre I don't read a lot. To read it back to back is like kind of nuts for me. I barely do that with the genres I love, you know? But yeah, I loved this book. It's so funny because like the whole time I was like, okay, high rating. But I didn't think of it's gonna be a 5. I didn't think I would just gonna like it better than the Buffalo Hunter. But like the last little bit, and especially like the last paragraph, I had like full body chills. It is a horror book. I want you to know that. But like, I loved the way that it ended. I'm getting chills again, just like thinking about it, honestly, and the way that it was put, and I already want to read it again. I feel like what this book does really well is that the entire thing, it feels like a horror movie. It feels like you're reading a horror movie, to like see this like revenge coming back for them and like their slow demise and like how's it gonna happen? Like, you know it's gonna happen because like that's what has been set up, but you don't know like how it's gonna happen, and you're like so worried for them. And then also you have this sense of like, for really anybody in the story, like anybody's at risk, you know? It's not just those people, like it could be anyone, especially after reading the Buffalo Hunter. It could be anyone. And I think that that adds a lot of suspense and like thrills in a way that I think a lot of thriller books have a hard time with, because typically like the main character makes it out in a thriller book. Like they typically survive to the end. But like in a horror book, anything could happen, especially like he jumps around perspectives. So like you could be in the perspective of a person that is being like actively hunted down, and you have no idea if they're gonna make it out or not. Like this could be the last time you are in their perspective or you're watching them specifically. Let's see what this does for my challenge. We'll start with the dark green squares that this one works for. So in the A to Z challenge, I decided to use this as my J book for Jones. In the spell your full name, I used it as the first S in my name for Stephen. And in the rainbow challenge, I counted it as my black book. So looking at the full bingo board, we can count this towards the A to Z square, the spell your full name square, the rainbow square, and of course, the book blurb square. Next, I decided I wanted to fully accomplish another square on the book bingo board. I just think that doing as many of those as early as possible is going to make the challenge seem more achievable, even if I am tackling the squares that you only need like one book to be able to accomplish. But there was one of these squares in particular that really did intimidate me, and that was a square to read a 500+ page book within one day. I'm actually really proud of my decision on this one, and technically I could have done like a graphic novel or something, but I really wanted to try doing a full novel, and I did it. So that's great. And that is A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. This one is just over 500 pages. I'm pretty sure it was like 509 pages. Plus it's the second book in a series that I had already started, so I knew the characters and I figured that that would help me read faster. And also I loved the first book of this so very much, so I thought that that would also indicate that this would be the easiest one for me to do within one day, with it actually being a novel and not like a graphic novel.
I'm reading A Gathering of Shadows. I've just started it this morning, and my goal is to read this entire book today. And I'm only 30 pages in, but hopefully I can get a good amount done today in these sprints.
So the Shades of Magic trilogy takes place in this version of the world where there are 4 parallel universes that all have some form of the city of London. So there is Grey London, which more closely resembles our London in that there is no, or at least very little magic. There is Red London with lots of magic, White London with a little bit of magic because most of it has been drained, and Black London, which is completely sealed off and known to be basically dead. And then our main characters are Kel, who is an Antari, which means he can travel between these universes. His mostly brother, Rai, who is a prince. I say mostly because there's like a whole thing, but that doesn't matter. I mean, it matters in the book, but like it doesn't matter in the synopsis. You get it. And Delilah, who is from Grey London, and basically some crazy stuff happens in the first book with a piece of magic that through a series of events kicks off what happens in the rest of the series. Okay, so it's been a minute since I finished these, but I did end up making it through A Gathering of Shadows in one day. Very proud of myself. And I ended up reading A Conjuring of Light like immediately afterwards. And they were both 5 stars. It's crazy because I feel like I was in this 5-star drought for like so much of the beginning of the year. And then it's just been like 5-star after 5-star after 5-star. So A Gathering of Shadows, it does feel a little bit like it has that second book syndrome, which basically feels like when you're in a trilogy and the second book almost feels more like it's a bridge between the first and the third book rather than it being its own thing. And I do think that this does a little bit feel like that, but I wasn't upset about it. Like, I don't think that the stakes were as high with what the climax of this book is. Like, the stakes are high, but it's really just setting up stuff that's gonna happen in the third book where, like, that's when we address those stakes. Whereas in this one, it's all just like building and building and building and building. And I think that maybe if I had read this while they were coming out, I would have been a little bit upset. I still think it would have been like very high rating for me, if not still a 5-star. Maybe it was the knowledge that like I already even like owned this book and could just like pick it up immediately afterwards. But if I had read it in that way, if it was like, okay, and now I don't get to read anything else from this series until the next book comes out, I think I would have been a little bit upset. But love the characters, love how much more we get from Rye, the prince, in this one, and then we get even more of him in this one, which is great. There's also a new character introduced in this book that I really liked, and I was a little bit confused as we were going with it at first, but then it went in a different direction and I loved it. I love the secondary characters in this series in general. I think that V. Schwab did such a great job writing them and having them be their own people while also serving some purpose within the story itself. Just overall, these were fantastic. As you saw, I ended up loving A Gathering of Shadows. So I immediately wound up reading A Conjuring of Light, the third book in the trilogy as well, and now I finished the whole thing. And also I love this one. I love the whole series. It's one of my favorite series ever at this point. Anyways, let's talk about the progress that I made in the challenge because of these 2 books. So in the A to Z challenge, I ended up using A Gathering of Shadows as the V book for V. Schwab, and in A Conjuring of Light, I used this as the L book for Light. And I also used it as the L for the Spell Your Name. And this one I use as the S for Shadows. I could obviously only count one of them in the genre challenge considering they are both fantasy books, so I just counted the first one that I read. But I do get to use both of them in the Rainbow Challenge because we have our red book and a purple book. And then I also accomplished part of the prompt for the Queer Rainbow Challenge, which is to read a book that represents each of the letters from LGBTQIA. Technically, the person is a main character in both of these books, but when I read this one, I felt like he wasn't enough of a main character for it to fulfill that challenge, so I wasn't gonna count it. But then in this one, he was more of a main character, and so now this one's going to count as the gay book for that challenge. And finally, what sparked me reading these 2 books to begin with, Gathering of Shadows does of course fulfill my read a 500+ page book in one day square. So here is where all of my numbers come to when I update all of those squares. At this point, we were getting really close to the end of the month, which means that I had to focus on one particular square. That square is to read a new book in the month that it's published for every month of the year that you're doing the challenge. So if you miss this, like that's it, challenge over. I ended up picking Gifted and Talented by Olivia Blake, which was published on April 1st. This book follows 3 siblings whose father passes away at the start of the book. Now, this is a super wealthy family and all of the children have reached some great success in one way or another. Meredith is the CEO of a big tech company that is launching a product that doesn't actually work in the way that it's advertised, but like she's still the CEO and everything. Then there's Arthur, who is a politician whose professional and personal life is a lot. And Ailey is a prima ballerina who gets a spinal cord injury and was instead working for her father's company when he died. So you already know that there's a lot of like waiting for the will type drama. And also, oddly, there's some magical realism. So I finished Gifted and Talented by Olivia Blake and I liked it. I think that it was a good book. It was a good like exploration into these very specific, almost caricatures of humans, but also like having this like magical element to it, which I didn't really realize, which is my fault. I didn't read the whole synopsis, but I think that that added a lot to it. It was hard to like truly root for or against any of them, but I did have a favorite. We also got to see this different kind of like relationship in it that I feel like you don't get to see in a lot of books, so that was kind of cool. And I do like a family story fighting over a will, especially like it's so fun because you don't know the contents of the will for like so long, and so it's all this like anticipation building to like getting to the will and wondering like what's gonna happen then. And I think that there's like a lot of questions of like, if you've done a lot of bad or a lot of like little things that lead to bad outcomes, like, can you come back from that? How do you come back from that? Can you do that in little bits like how you got there? Or do you have to do that as like a whole rip the band-aid off reset? Actually, I would really love a sequel to this book to see where the characters go from here, because I think that that would be really interesting. And honestly, I think I would like a sequel to this better than I liked this book. All in all, it ended up being 4 stars for me. I do think it was good. I think it was a little bit long. I don't think it needed to be quite that long, but I did like the character voices and everything. All the tangential characters, I feel like they really had specific personalities, which I love to see in a book. That's like my favorite. If you can like really nail the like supporting cast, like that's my favorite. But I don't really have all that much to say about it. I think you probably could draw some things like societally, but I also feel like there's other media that maybe approaches it better than this one did. But this one didn't do a bad job. It's just that like, it doesn't make me want to have those conversations. It just makes me feel like, okay, it was there. It existed there. Okay, so the prompts for this one. I use this as the O in the A to Z challenge for Olivie. For the Queer Rainbow challenge, I use this as the Bi/Pan book. And then obviously I use this as the April book in my read a new book every month of the challenge and in the month that it's published. I need to get better at saying what that prompt is, because I'm gonna have to talk about it in every video. Oh, and I used it as my blue book in the Rainbow Challenge. So with all of that added in, here is my full bingo board numbers. And then the last book we're going to talk about more in depth is going to be Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. This I actually got as my TBR spin pick for the month of May. TBR spin being a year-long reading challenge that I do, but I always do the spin a little bit early so that people can set their TBRs for the next month. So I actually did end up reading this or finishing this book before the end of April, so it's counting towards this.
Okay, it's not a swap. I don't know what it is though. It's the most unhinged / strange premise. Horror Store. I feel like this has just gotta win.
Horror Store is a paranormal horror set in an IKEA-style store called Orsk. And the book is actually laid out like it's a catalog for IKEA. So you have the how to visit the Orsk showroom. You have a picture of the store, which looks very much like an IKEA. You've got a home delivery order form, and every chapter starts with a picture and description of some type of furniture. So I don't have a clip talking about like my end feelings for Horror Store, but this was good. I had a fun time reading it. I do think that once you get past like the halfway point and like things are like really kicking off, then it reads a little bit quicker, but it did still kind of drag for me, which I'm surprised about because it's not a long book, but I did really love what it had to say about like capitalism and, well, really just capitalism. I think it did a good job of like being both a horror story and also saying something a little bit like grander outside of that. I also really like the way that it ended. So let's talk about the challenges from this, the prompts that it fulfills. You may have remembered at the beginning of this video when I talked about The Only Good Indians that one of the people that blurbed that book was, in fact, Grady Hendrix. So this gets us one step closer to accomplishing that square. I also counted it as the H book in the A to Z challenge and the H in my name. And also it's the white book in the Rainbow challenge. Now my plan for the end of this video was to talk about all the books that I read in the month that could count towards the challenges but aren't counting towards any of like the more difficult ones to get. And by that I mostly mean the books that I can't double up on, although some of the ones that I can double up on are still a little bit challenging to get. I think I will need to put more focus into getting them. But I didn't want to talk more in depth on like every book that accomplishes a letter from the A to Z challenge and things like that. But it turns out that this month there's actually only one book that I read that doesn't go towards like one of the squares that I would consider to be more difficult to get, and that is This Book Will Bury Me by Ashley Winstead. So I did read this month, but it really is only going to count towards squares I can double up on really easily. So I'm not going to go into depth about the synopsis or anything, but if you're curious, I have talked about the synopsis of this in quite a few videos at this point. I know at least my most anticipated releases of 2025, the 25 books that I want to read in 2025, because I picked 5 of those books are new releases, and this was one of them, and also my TBR for April. Any of those 3 videos, you can hear me talk about the synopsis of this book. And if you're curious how I felt about it, it was 5 stars. I loved it. I used this as the W for Winstead in the A to Z challenge, and also the W in my middle name. It was also my first thriller of reading this challenge, so it accomplishes that in the genre square. So we can update those numbers on the bingo board. And there you have it, all of my reading for April and how much progress that got me in the hardest reading challenge you'll ever do. I think it's a great start because I fully accomplished 2 squares, so that feels good, but it's starting to sink in like just how much of an undertaking this is gonna be, which I knew it would. I knew that that feeling would happen at some point, and like it's happening now. Anyways, if you like this style of video, please do let me know. This is a little bit of a different style for me, doing like this half sit down, half vlog style video. And so I would love to hear what you think about it. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.